The rereader is looking not for actual surprises, which can come only once, but for a certain surprisingness. So it is time, my dear friends, to reread one of my favorite books, The Scarlet Pimpernel. Along with this reread comes a discussion on rereading and what purpose it serves. Now, I've always been the type of person that if I enjoyed something, I want to reread it, I want to rewatch it, I just want to experience it again and see everything build up to like a wonderful ending. And I've always never quite understood why other people are like one and done with something. They're like, oh, I read it, like I already know it, I don't need to read it again. And over the last year or so, I've realized that people that don't like to reread are probably like just reading for the ending, are just looking for surprises and tension and stakes. And that's just never the main thing that I've ever gotten out of a story. I'm not criticizing you if that's all that you want out of a story, like you do you. This is just a discussion on why I think rereading has its purpose, especially if you want to explore the craft of storytelling. I think rereading is super important. But before I get to rereading this, I'm going to talk about what C.S. Lewis had to say about rereading in his essay on stories. We do not enjoy a story fully at the first reading. Not till the curiosity, the sheer narrative lust, has been given its sop and laid asleep, are we at leisure to savor the real beauties. Till then, it is like wasting great wine on a ravenous natural thirst which merely wants cold wetness. The children understand this well when they ask for the same story over and over again, and in the same words. They want to have, again, the surprise of discovering that what seemed Little Red Riding Hood's grandmother is really the wolf. It is better when you know it is coming. Free from the shock of actual surprise, you can attend better to the intrinsic surprisingness of the peripetia. Am I saying that right?
Peripetia.
Oh. Peripetia. Peripetia is a sudden reversal of fortune or change in circumstances, especially in reference to fictional narrative. So what this is basically saying that once we get like the surprise and the need to get to the end of something, then we can appreciate everything else that the story is doing, whether that's foreshadowing, parallels, dramatic irony, things like that. So I'm excited to read this. This will be my third time reading this. So I'm already expecting like an amazing first chapter. I've always really loved the way that the story is told in the first chapter and how evocative it is, and how like the first paragraph is literally not even a complete sentence. It's just the setting, and it's very gripping. A surging, seething, murmuring crowd of beings that are human only in name, for to the eye and ear they seem naught but savage creatures, animated by vile passions and by the lust of vengeance and of hate. But I also know that I might have a hard time getting through chapters 2 to 4, because both times I've read this before, for some reason, chapters 2 to 4 don't do it for me. The story really picks back up in 5 whenever our main characters are introduced. So we're gonna see if I can really get anything out of those 2nd to 4th chapters this time, or if I am still of the opinion that they're just there. So according to this note at the beginning of the book, Baroness Orczy wrote this in 5 weeks, which should be motivation for me to get on to my freaking books that I want to write. Gosh. So I came to a different park today because I'm on the other side of the city, and so now I get to enjoy the lake. Woo! I'm a little bit further ahead in the audiobook than physically reading this. I wanted to make sure that I really got everything I could out of the 2nd through 4th chapters that I was talking about I have a hard time with. And so I've read the first 3 chapters physically, and goodness, the lake looks so pretty today. Oh, there's a duck. Anyway, so rereading the 2nd and 3rd chapters now, I do actually think I've gleaned a little bit of something from them. I still think that the 2nd chapter overall is mostly pointless, But the purpose of the chapters is to kind of show what the outside world thinks about what's happening in France during the Reign of Terror, and people who like think they should get involved, and other people are just like, no, just let them murder each other. And I was supposed to buddy read this earlier this year with Leslie, and I started it like a couple of days late, and by the time I talked to her, I was just like, hey, I'm finally gonna start that today, and she's just like, oh, I finished. And so I decided to put it down until I felt like I could really get to it. But Leslie and I had talked about the ending and how it put into perspective that the French people that were committing the guillotine acts and all of that weren't totally justified, and it's because of Chauvelin, who is like the main bad guy that we follow and is trying to arrest the Scarlet Pimpernel. And this is one of the modern day criticisms that I've heard of the book, about how like was the Scarlet Pimpernel right in doing this and saving aristocrats during the Reign of Terror. There's a boat. I'd like a boat. But anyway, I brought all of that up to say that that's kind of what the beginning of the book is talking about, whether or not what the Scarlet Pimpernel was doing was right or whatever. Talking about right or wrong and the hypocrisy of either stance. But aside from that, it gives us these characters that aren't relevant to the rest of the plot. They are only in like these first 4 or 5 chapters, but like it almost tries to treat them like they're going to be main characters, and I think that's always what has felt weird about the chapters to me. So like you could do like a straight up character study on some of them, on Sally and like what it's like to be a woman like in a working position. You could look at people like Jellyband and Hempseed and like their ideologies and all that. So I mean, like, they're interesting enough characters, but they're like unnecessary to the remainder of the plot, and so it feels weird to know so much about them. I think that's always been why I'm just like, let me just get to chapter 5. Although probably not chapter 5, because chapter 3 starts introducing some of the people that are in the league of the Scarlet Pimpernel, and I think I was a little bit more invested in chapter 3 than I was in chapter 2. So, who knows? All right, so I got to about page 100 last night. That was about 10 chapters in, and I listened to a couple more on the way to work today, and I'm stopping to film here before I wind up just ending up finishing the book, because that's looking how it's gonna be. I'm just gonna bust through the rest of it. But I'm glad that I'm rereading this, because I feel like I can answer better some of those modern day criticisms that I was talking about whenever I recorded yesterday, because reading this now, like, I'm noticing more of the nuances behind like all the characters and the situation. For one thing, we followed 3 aristocrats that the Scarlet Pimpernel has already saved, and one of them is still a terrible person. And like, she had a line towards the beginning of the book. She said, "We are in England now, madam, and I am at liberty to forbid my daughter to touch your hand in friendship." And I wrote on the little tab that that is good and bad, because it's good that she has that freedom now, but it's bad because this is what led to the whole revolution in the first place, was this kind of attitude. And she was still trying to be insulting. And like, our main character, Marguerite, was actually a poor French girl, and she married like the richest man in Britain. But this aristocratic woman, like, there are other reasons why she doesn't like Marguerite, but she still is also coming off with that, like, you just married rich or whatever, you're not a true aristocrat kind of feeling. And she has plenty of people criticize her for it. And like, someone even said like, hey, like, this attitude is why you had to flee France in the first place. And then the 2 other people that were saved are her children, and her daughter is actually a very nice person and was friends with Marguerite growing up. And even though like she's heard the same information about Marguerite being a possible traitor, she like still wants to be her friend. So like, you've got like a bad aristocrat, you've got a good aristocrat, and you've got Marguerite, who holds the ideals of the New Republic of France and the same stances on equality and freedom and all of that. But like being more on the outside looking in, she's just like, you guys are taking this too far. And that's a good nuance, I think. Like the main character like isn't an aristocrat that was trying to escape. The main character is someone that could go back to France and like would be safe to be there because she's seen as one of the common people. Even though like she married rich, like she could go back. And she even like felt sympathy for the Republic. But at the end of the day, she was just like, no, like I don't approve of like all of this widespread slaughter. All that to say is that I think this book is more nuanced than some modern day criticisms give it credit for. But now we're like getting into the heat of the book, right before like Marguerite finds out who the Scarlet Pimpernel is, and right before Chauvelin finds out who the Scarlet Pimpernel is, and he's like not tricked her, he's blackmailed her into figuring out who the Scarlet Pimpernel is. And like the book's really just about to take off, and like this is just a delicious moment right before. And then we've got wonderful Percy, who's just like having the time of his life. Like whenever people are talking about the Scarlet Pimpernel, and like he hears how his wife talks about the Scarlet Pimpernel, and he's just like, well, but now all the husbands have to live with their wives being in love with this shadow instead of them. And like he just enjoys like being the life of the party and like being all fashionable. And he just really comes across as like the densest person ever. But the little part that I have highlighted right here is actually included in the musical version of this story. We seek him here, we seek him there. Those Frenchies seek him everywhere. Is he in heaven? Is he in hell? That dim, delusive Pimpernel. And that's just Percy going off and being funny. I just love his character so much. But anyway, now I probably will not update until I am through with this book, so I will see you later. The third reread is done. It's actually been done since like Saturday. It is now Thursday, and I just haven't updated yet for whatever reason. So is this book still a favorite of mine? Yes, it is. Look at like how much I ended up tabbing it. So like the last third or so of this book is still so easy to fly through, so engaging and fun. I love Marguerite as an MC. She actually even grew on me more this time. Still have such a big soft spot for Percy. I need more characters like Percy. My love for Percy is up there with people like Howl. I would actually say that Howl and Percy have similar traits that like it makes sense that I would love both of them so much. And then Hal actually kind of reminds me of Kisuke from Bleach, and I could see like there's actually probably a lot more similarities between Percy and Kisuke than Percy and Howl. But anyway, this is a book that continues to be one of my favorites even after rereading it 3 times. I am going to make this regular yearly reread because it's just something that I feel like I need. I may even read it again before the year is out. So if you enjoy rereading like I do, list some of the books that you really love to reread in the comments, and I will talk to you later.